Americans are eager for alternatives to hostile, woke companies. At New Founding, we want to help. What does it take to grow an exceptional, pro-American business, and how can we start more of them? Welcome to Align, where you can find out. Our host, Bart Lamont, will be your guide. From his Indiana family farm to Air Force veteran, Shark Tank entrepreneur to president of Principal Investments, Bart is your premier guide to buying pro-American.
Good morning, I'm Bart Lamont, your host of the Align podcast. Our guest today is Matt Roberts of Liberty Tabletop Flatware and Sherrill Manufacturing. Liberty is the only flatware manufacturer made in the USA. You can see their products yourself at libertytabletop.com. Good morning, Matt. How are things in the Silver City, Sherrill, today?
Great, Bart. It's not snowing. It's in the 50s, so that's a win for us up here from a weather standpoint.
Matt, one of the things I love, about this show and meeting other entrepreneurs is learning a little bit about their background, right? It's never a linear path to entrepreneurship. I think you've got a very decorated academic history, impressive background there. I'm sure when you're sitting in some of your electrical engineering classes, you never dreamt you'd one day be making spoons. So how does one go from working on stealth bombers to manufacturing spoons?
Well, I grew up in Oneida, New York. My father was a chemistry teacher, so I took chemistry and AP chemistry from him. I'm a math and science guy, and I love Central New York. I love the atmosphere. You're close to the Adirondacks. There's a lot of lakes and stuff like that. You got the four seasons. Sometimes when it gets to February, March, it gets a little old. But so I went to Oneida High School. I knew about Oneida Limited at the time. I had some friends and some family members. My grandfather worked here from the 40s through the 1970s. But I took a different path. I'm a math and science guy, so I went to a local community college, MVCC, for engineering science, then transferred to Clarkson up in Potsdam, New York, and studied electrical and computer engineering. And I chose that. You're gonna laugh. I chose that because I looked at the average salaries coming out of school in the engineering, and they made more than mechanical engineers. So I figured, why not become a double E? I enjoyed that, and I worked for General Electric for 5 years in Utica, New York, in the aerospace, doing stealth technology, radars and passive infrared systems. And in 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. Remember Mr. Gorbachev tear down that wall. So when that happened, there was a lot of consolidation in the defense business, and General Electric sold to Martin Marietta, which now is now Lockheed Martin. So I was out of a job. And I could have gone to a number of different places, but we knew the CEO of Oneida Limited. His kids played Little League baseball with me, and I went to high school with them. And he was a really good guy. Bill Matthews is his name. He recently passed away. So he got me an interview, and as an engineer. And the ironic thing was that, first of all, I've never been to the factory. And the second thing was that the people that interviewed me said that, we don't need this guy. We don't want to hire him. And Bill Matthews said, you're hiring him. So sometimes it helps who you know and not what you know. Right. So I got hired. I was basically shoved down the throat of the manufacturing guys in the factory. So I went through the factory, and I'm thinking, how hard can it be to make a spoon, for God's sakes? And I was absolutely flabbergasted at the size, magnitude, the processes, the noises and stuff flying around, and the smells and the tooling, and just the way that they manufacture the product. I was just absolutely in love with it. The second thing that happened was I looked around at all the management, and except for a couple of people, most of the management team was my dad's age. So I'm thinking to myself, you could run this factory someday if you put your nose to the grindstone. That was back in 91. Fast forward to a little after 2000, 2002, I moved up through the organization, and in 2003, I was running the factory. It was great. It was my dream job. We had 1,500 employees. It was a pretty prestigious position, And then I was called over into the administration building in 2004 by the CEO, CFO, and some board members. And they said, we're closing the factory. The main reason for the factory closing was in 2000, the Bush administration allowed China to join the World Trade Organization. And if you look at manufacturing jobs in the United States from 2000 to 2006, they plummeted. And that was the main reason. There were some other, fundamental problems with the balance sheet that Oneida had. They'd bought some companies and, overpaid for them, et cetera. But the main reason the factory was going to close was due to the WTO, China and the WTO. Mm-hmm. So, other than the fact that I sat in my office and just stewed for a few weeks, and I knew that the factory was going to close, but none of the employees did. So I literally had to figure out a way to shut the factory down and financially keep it cash flow as minimal as possible, or try to stay positive. So I'm sitting in my office and I'm looking at, so let's look at the retail game for a minute. If you go to Macy's and you spend $100 on a sport coat, they paid $20 for it. And the Ralph Lauren paid $10 for it. And the manufacturer maybe made a couple bucks. So something that costs $8 to make overseas, you're paying $100 for. Mm-hmm. So I knew the cost of all of the product. I knew what the factory was good at. I knew what the factory wasn't good at. And I'm sitting there thinking, there might be a play for the factory in creating our own brand and making a very small, focused factory in the things that we're good at, and maybe we could make it work.
Right. And this is 2004?
This is 2004.
Okay.
Right as we're going to announce that the factory is closing.
Okay.
And Bart, at that time, there was no one else interested in the factory. There was no one. The only people interested were scrap dealers. So I called one of my close friends, Greg Owens. We met actually in Mexico when I was running a factory for Oneida in Toluca outside of Mexico City, and we were neighbors. He actually ended up being part of the Oneida team for a little while, and he sold the Mexican factory to someone that closed. So I called him up and I said, Greg, got an idea. How would you like to buy a flatware factory? And he laughed. Two little guys like us buying a 1 million square foot factory on 90 acres of land that used to employ at one time 2,500 people. So he said, you know what? Let's just start with a blank sheet of paper and see if there's a business model that we can come up with that will work. Mm-hmm. So he flew up here, and he was in my house. It was sort of hush hush. We announced the factory was closing. We had to say goodbye to people in different waves. It was going to close in early 2005. So we started formulating our plan and putting a business plan together. So the business plan was this. We were going to still manufacture for Oneida and maybe a couple other companies, low margin OEM business. And then we were going to build our own brand and fit ourselves in between the manufacturer and the retailer somewhere. We really didn't know where at the time, because at the time internet retail was in its infancy. I think Jeff Bezos was still selling CDs and books out of his garage at that time. So nobody really was thinking about that. Right. So another ironic part of the story at that time is my oldest son, and we didn't talk about this before, but just when we were in the throes of getting all of this business plan together, we were going to put together financing. We had negotiations with lawyers and accountants, and they had consultants. It was like a four-dimensional chess. My son was re-diagnosed with a brain tumor, Andrew, and I spent with my wife almost all of January and half of February at New York Presbyterian Hospital, and he had 2 surgeries there, which, by the way, came out well. So Greg was basically doing all of this stuff on his own, and the outcome was great. Andrew's still doing well. He's got 2 little kids now and lives in North Carolina. But that closing the factory, negotiating to buy a factory, and on February 16th, 2005, we signed the closing documents, which ironically was my wife's birthday. So I told Alice, my wife, that I bought you a flatware factory for your birthday. Happy birthday. What do you think?
Well, you gotta
so
love
that's how we got to the
spouse.
point where we bought the factory. That's how we got to the point where we bought the factory, Bart.
Right. So it's 2005. Oneida is Sherrill, right? I mean, Sherrill is the Silver City in Oneida County, New York. Can you just tell us a little bit about Sherrill and the community there?
Sure. I call Sherrill Mayberry. It's the smallest city in New York State, about 2,500 people. It was really built and master planned by Oneida Limited. It started out as a commune in the 1840s, the Oneida community, and they lasted up until the late 1870s, and they disbanded. But one of the things that survived the community, they had a very interesting business savvy. They had a lot of business savvy, let's say. The Victor mousetrap was invented and manufactured here. They did canning goods, but they actually ended up focusing on flatware. So out of the community came Oneida Community Limited, which became Oneida Limited, and then the city basically grew around the company. They master planned all of these streets, sold plots of land at a bargain rate to employees, so that that's why it became the Silver City.
Classic company town, right? That built,
exactly.
the backbone of American manufacturing. I can't count the number of towns. I grew up in Northeast Indiana, but you go down to Columbus, Indiana, and the Cummins, influence on a town like that, so strong. But well, speaking of other parts of our great country. Love your flag behind you. Thank you for your proud patriotism and just everything you're building in your brand. I'm going to read a little bit from the About Us section on your website. There's a large bolded section. The headline, it states, "At Liberty Tabletop, our mission has always been to preserve American jobs. While supply chain disruptions are affecting every sector of the economy, you must take some solace in the fact that, it hasn't always been easy producing made in America goods. But as you're watching, competitors have their product sitting in a container waiting to get into port, can you just talk to us about some of the challenges you have faced, but also some of the, upside and return on investment you're seeing now today in this climate?
Right. So back when the factory was slated to be closed, I was screaming into the darkness that we cannot move all of our manufacturing jobs overseas. We're going to be reliant on other countries. We have a group of individuals that want to work in factories. We're disenfranchising a huge swath of Americans, people that want to work in the United States. So actually sort of touche when I hear that people are struggling to get their products from overseas, the supply chain, I told you so. I didn't know when it was going to happen in my lifetime, my kid's lifetime. It just happened to happen, in 2020 to 2022. But the challenges that we have working are actually strengths. Okay, so when you're your own boss and you're your own company, you're not beholden to shareholders. You're not beholden to investors in New York City that you're basically a cell on an Excel spreadsheet, and it better be in the black, and it better be growing.
Quarterly growth.
Right. We look at it differently. So number one is our employees. So my philosophy when I came up with this idea was the factory. It's not the factory's fault that they shut down. It's the federal government, these trade multinational companies. It's it's people on Wall Street that are looking for ROI on a quarterly basis. So let's make the factory the engine and not the sales and marketing. So we are selling a factory when we sell products on Liberty Tabletop. We call it factory to table. So that was our differentiating factor. All of our steel is melted in the United States. Our packaging comes from about 20 miles away in Sherburne, New York, Earlville Paper Box, Divine Brothers and Van Industries in Detroit, and in Utica, New York, provide us with our buffing compound, all of our buffs and buffs so that we can polish. So we do everything we can to be as local as possible, which is the exact opposite of the quote unquote supply chain. You look for the cheapest place possible, and then you look to try to build that supply chain as tight as possible so you don't have as much cash held up. But what happens when that gets cut off? You got the problems we're talking about now with the supply chain. So those were the things that we use as a differentiating factor. They became weaknesses because it costs a lot more money to buy steel that's melted in the United States. It costs a lot more to buy packaging from a small mom and pop place 20 miles down the road. So we didn't look for price. We looked for long-term strategic handshake relationships with our vendors and our customers. So that, while that made our product more expensive, as soon as you go online, the internet is the great equalizer when it comes to retail. So we're not competing with Oneida, some brand in China or anywhere else. We're competing with Macy's, Bed Bath & Beyond, Neiman Marcus, Bloomingdale's, Williams-Sonoma. So head to head, we can be competitive even though our product is so much more expensive to make in New York State.
Mm-hmm. And so obviously you are the only made in America, USA manufactured flatware right. provider. How do you talk a little bit? One thing we love to tell the story of and is the e-commerce direct-to-consumer strategy, right? How you can truly be competitive. You talked a little bit about retail margins and that side, but when there are groups in China, Vietnam, Africa, wherever, right? I mean, if you're truly competing on price, it's a race to the bottom. How do you differentiate your brand from those other groups, producing overseas and selling in Macy's?
Well, one of the things that we when it was Oneida, I was always trying to take cost out of the product, mm-hmm. ways to cut corners so that we could be competitive. We're doing the exact opposite. Now, when we started the website in October of 2010, we manufactured a bunch of product with our designs, and we started looking at it, and we said, you know what? We're putting our name on the back of this. I don't like this. I think we can make it better. So we literally took all of the product out of the bags and refinished everything to a standard that we thought was up here, right. Okay, as good as we could. So the reason we can do that is we're selling direct online. So there's a number of different benefits of selling your product online. One of the negatives is that it takes a long time to build your brand. Right. Okay, flatware is a very infrequent purchase. The average person, marketing studies have said, purchases flatware 3 times in their lifetime. So building that brand is very difficult, and it took us probably 5 years before we had economies of scale where we started to see the return on our investment. Mm-hmm. The second thing that's really important is that you can sell for retail price. Okay, the money's not going to anyone but the employees that are actually physically making it. I love that. Right. I love that the people that are the craftsmen that are making it are getting the rewards from the sales.
Yeah, I think real quick. I think that's an important point that I want to kind of delineate here is, in the past, that there was an argument to buy local versus online. Online is not just Amazon, right? Online is direct to consumer from your website. That is a direct transaction, right? Yeah, as you said, the internet's the great equalizer. You can ship your product anywhere in the world and capture the rest of that margin. And so, as we talk through supporting local small businesses, going to libertytabletop.com is doing exactly that.
Right. It's supporting people that are actually making the product.
Right.
There's nobody in between. Mm-hmm. The other thing that helps you bootstrap yourself in an online business model is the cash flow. Right. So our accounts receivable are 4 days, because as soon as you ship the product, It goes into the clearinghouse of a credit card company. When we used to deal with huge retailers like JCPenney and Macy's and even Walmart for some time, is that you'd ship them $5 million worth of product, and you might see the money in 45 days, 60 days. They charge you back if they see things aren't right. You have to pay for their advertising. When Macy's puts out a flyer and they put out all these big advertising flyers, the vendors pay for it. They don't pay for it. Okay? So it's a nightmare from a cash standpoint. You have to have so much working capital in your accounts receivable. Not the case on internet retail.
Right. So you mentioned the average consumer buys flatware 3 times in their life. I'll be honest, right. I'm 38 years old, have never purchased it in my lifetime, right? I think maybe
get going.
Was gifted it from a family member there. But no, I think it's very important to me, how again you've differentiated. I think in an earlier conversation you mentioned you're making flatware cool again. Looking through your website, I saw product lines like Betsy Ross, Annapolis, Liberty, Lincoln. Who are your customers, and how are you, encouraging them to buy a little bit more frequently, or, coming out saying this is a different product. This is not your mother's china.
Right. There's a couple different things we've been doing. Okay. When we started the business, Greg started the internet in our designs. Greg would go to a store and he would do his marketing research, and we copied the designs that were on the shelf. If it's selling in retail, that means
there's a market.
It's dollars per square foot. That's how the planogram works in a retail space. So we started out with 7, 8, 9 different designs, and then what our this is a really interesting story, and it's something that none of us are brilliant. It just fell in our lap. Mm-hmm. So we have a designer on staff, Eric Lawrence, who's a fabulous designer. He's an artist in steel. He cuts the first die by hand. He makes all of the samples out of brass by hand. Him and a couple of the employees were into The Walking Dead. They're into Harley Davidson motorcycles and all this kind of stuff. So he showed up with a bunch of samples that he made on his own time out of brass. One of them had a zombie with their hair sticking up. Another one was all skulls and flames and all this stuff. And he says, guys, I'm telling you, I've been doing my research on Facebook, and this stuff will sell. So we have an office meeting once a week with everyone, including our wives, Kate and Alice. And we put the samples out on the table, and everybody was like, you gotta be kidding me. This is hideous. We're not gonna sell this. How are we gonna put our name on the back of a design with skulls on it? So we just basically told them to go pound salt and just get back to work. And, we know how to market stuff and, whatever. We didn't actually say it that way, but, in a much softer way. But 6 months later, Greg came in my office and he said, Matt, these guys are they're bothering me. And they're not going to stop until we listen to them. So we made a design called Calavera, and it's Spanish for skull. Okay. So skull is sort of like, Calavera rolls off your tongue. It's a little bit better from a marketing standpoint. So I said, I'm going to make 1,200 place settings of this against my better judgment, but I'm going to do it. We'll do it. We did it, and it flew off the shelf.
Really?
Absolutely. People were tagging their friends on Facebook. Oh my God, you got to have this. And we would market it, hashtag Harley Davidson, hashtag Walking Dead, hashtag, skulls. Dia de los Muertos is a big thing now. So that fell in our lap, what we call affinity designs. Mm-hmm. So they're designs that are so unique, you will not find them anywhere else in the world. Because we make our tools in a certain way, the competitors can't do it.
Right. So
we came out with Calavera, which are the skulls. And you can go on our website and look at them. It's pretty amazing.
I've seen them, yeah.
The next one we came up with was Celtic. So we have a big Irish population here in central New York. Tipperary Hill in Syracuse. I think they're the only place in the United States where the green light is on top of the street light. Right. And we came up with all of these Celtic symbols and put them on design. Each handle has a different symbol on it. That flew off the shelf. We came up with Woodstock, which has got peace signs and daisies for the 50th anniversary of the Woodstock festival. That sells well. And then the last one we did that's really took off is my father-in-law, who we lost a few years ago, David Taylor, was a beekeeper. And my wife says, these are hot, Matt, you got to have a bee design, So we came up with a honeybee design that quote unquote's flying off the shelf also. So these are, and we have one for holidays, so it has a Christmas theme. We have one with a nautical theme. We actually made a design for Jeff Dunham with Ahmed the Terrorist and Walter. He sells it on his website, but we can make things that other people can't. It's unique designs that you could actually buy 3 or 4 or 5 different patterns and use them in different times of the year. So that's allowed us to go from the demographic of fairly well-to-do middle-aged people that have the money to buy made in USA, the higher end, to now we're getting these affinity groups, and some people will buy just a place setting, or they'll buy soup spoons, or just something as a novelty. Right. So that's really expanded our sales in flatware.
That's another trend I've seen, throughout the e-commerce market, especially, right, where traditional retail, and obviously flatware is a little bit different in terms of seasonality, right? But if you look at men's apparel or any other type of traditional retail, there's, hey, I've got to order my Christmas season products in March. I'm going to place that order. It's going to ship. It's going to go back and forth there. Today the companies that are really doing well in e-commerce, they have the ability to iterate very quickly and get product out immediately, right? Whether it is, again, still, I see on your website you've got an Easter design, right? I mean, you still want seasonal offerings, but also to these affinity groups, I think that's brilliant. And, kudos to your marketing team and your creative inspiration there. Talking about, just kind of that production process, the metallurgy around it. I learned a lot looking into your company about the 1810, the different compositions of the metals and that. But can I just walk us through, if we said we've got an idea today for a set of flatware, how long does it take to get from the ideation period to, sitting on my shelf, that it would come through? Can you walk us through that production?
It's a 4 to 6 month process, which is not as long as most people would think. Mm-hmm. So we have different shapes, okay, and that's sort of the palette that we use to put designs on it. So the Liberty design, which was really a really neat design, is on a certain specific shape, a certain outline. The other ones are on a different shape. So because we have that shape, we take the blank piece that we make and we add the pattern detail to it. So we can cut our development times back in the Oneida days when we used to make a new design. They would have a different outline. It could take 18 months to 2 years to come up with a new design and have it to market. We're a lot quicker than that. We coming from, we ask our tooling guys, what can we do to make things faster? And we just do it that way.
So you bought the actual factory operations 2005. Now, fast forwarding, you're learning the business to run it yourself, right? Especially on the sales side. A lot of global macro trends changing from WTO and changes there, but also the Great Recession. I think you mentioned the facility is 1 million square feet. Right. Once housed 1,200 to 1,500 employees. So now we're coming into 2010. Like any entrepreneur, you've got a few battle scars to prove you've been through cyclicality of industry. Can you talk a little bit about the days where I'm sure you wondered, how are we going to make payroll? What does next month look like?
Right. So we recapitalized our business in 2007, and we got a bunch of money loaned so that we could make our own designs. So we were highly leveraged, relatively speaking, in 2007 going into 2008, because we wanted to continue with the OEM, continue renting the unused portions of the facility, developing that, and then creating our brand. And when the Lehman thing happened in 2008 and the economy stopped, all of our OEM business stopped. Whoosh. Because it's Oneida and Libby. We were manufacturing for some big companies, they had all this inventory and their sales fell off. So they were living off their inventory. So we had two other parts of our business. We have a GSA contract, so we manufacture for the government, and we have a partner in Cutco Cutlery, which is the largest cutlery manufacturer in the United States. They're in Olean, New York. We manufacture the forks and spoons for them. Okay, so our business went from I'm making up numbers, $5 million in sales to $2 million. And we still had this 1 million square foot factory. We struggled for 2 years, and then on October 4th of 2010, we had to file bankruptcy. And nobody's proud of that. I thought when we filed bankruptcy that I was just going to throw the keys on the floor. They were going to take my car, my house, and I was going to have to move somewhere and start over. Actually, the opposite happened. It's a funny thing. If you owe $10 to the bank, it's your problem. If you owe $2 million to the bank, it's their problem. So we ended up, with the help of our accounting group, our lawyers, who are really close friends of ours actually, and our bank, we were able to reorganize the business. And what we told them was, look, internet retail is the future. So we literally started our internet store, our website, the same week that we declared bankruptcy. And we started it under our wives' names because Greg and I couldn't even get a credit card. We're bankrupt. It was an S corp. So it was we're done. So Alice and Kate, we created this company called USA Brands, owned by our wives, and then we started shipping in October of 2010. And it took us a little over 3 years. We sold the land and buildings. We're not developers. We're flatware people, manufacturers. So we're a tenant now. We auctioned off everything we didn't need, and we kept all the toys we needed to keep our business going and to grow. And we consolidated it from about 500,000 square feet into 125,000 square feet, and that's where we are today. So we exited in 2014. We do have another family invested with us. So the company is owned by the Roberts family, the Owens family, and the Drummond family. They're local Syracuse people. They're great friends of ours, and we've been growing ever since 2014 to this year. I think in 2014 our total sales might have been 3 million. We're going to be scaring 11-12 million this year.
Congratulations! I
Thank you.
Anyone who started a business out there, all the entrepreneurs listening, I'm sure can appreciate the importance of a supportive spouse. I remember, telling my wife, my first time I wanted to start a business. Of course, a month or two later, we find out she's pregnant. So, no income, but I'd say, you said, was it Alice or Allison and Kate?
Alice.
Yeah. Alice and Kate, that's a whole new level to be along for the ride of entrepreneurship, but then immediately take on a new phase of it under your name. That's a really inspiring story. Kudos to them.
Yeah. So Alice's mother worked for Oneida Limited for a number of years. Both of her brothers worked for us. One of them has since retired. And she's involved. She does all of our human resources. It's funny because when we started the company, I was doing the HR. I had that so screwed up in 6 months. It was an absolute disaster. And I was begging her. She was working for a company that did benefits, and she did flexible spending accounts and all that stuff. And it took me about 5-6 months, and I finally got her to come work for us and work with us. And it took her about a year to untangle the mess that I came up with. But the other funny story is when you're a GSA vendor for the government, there's different, minority-owned, Native American-owned, woman-owned, small business, hub zone. There's all these different categories that you get an advantage for because it's a distressed thing. So that was one of the questions: is Sherrill Manufacturing woman-owned? And I said no, but it's woman-run. I'll tell you that. Sure, yeah.
But it truly is.
It's a great thing. It's a great thing.
It truly is a family business, right? You've got family working in the business. It's family owned. We love those stories. But I mean, if you're doing 11 or 12 million dollars in revenue, that's not a small business. Maybe technically by some lower middle market standards like that, but you've got a serious operation there.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of time. We always knew, we know how big the market is for the products that we're good at.
Right.
Okay. We know how big it is, but the key is how do you get the word out? And then how do you grow your business outside of even the flatware? So here's the other thing. If you go on our website, and Greg actually came up with this a few years ago, and he said, look, we're really good at making flatware, but there's other things in the kitchen and in the bar, that people want, and we can't make them here. Okay. So he went on sort of a quest, looking all over the United States to find like-minded companies, family-owned businesses, smaller businesses that manufacture in the United States. So we found everything from pots and pans. We have glassware. We have china. We actually found a couple guys, a group in, I think it's Illinois. They actually make ice cream scoops in the United States.
Really?
So there's all kinds of crazy stuff that we're throwing on our website. But what it does is it allows the customer to say, look, Matt and Greg and their team have done all the vetting of these companies. We make sure that, it's not imported and they're marking it something's, and that it's a quality product. So we test them.
Right.
When we test them in the home. So if you go on our website, there's more than just knives, forks, and spoons. And these are actual companies that we're friends with. They're all made in USA companies just like us. And we're helping them, giving them another avenue to sell their products in.
That's wonderful. And you and Greg are also a part of a coalition, representing, fair trade and more American manufacturing. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? And if anyone wants to get involved, what they can do?
Sure. We're members of a group called the Coalition for a Prosperous America. And what it is it's really a group that we get involved in D.C. with the House, with the Senate, with the administration. And we tell them, look, this is what's going on out there. When we sent manufacturing overseas, this is what happened to our economy. Yeah, you can buy something cheap at Walmart, but the person who was making $30 an hour to manufacture it now is barely getting by because you sent their jobs overseas because you didn't think their jobs were great. We don't want to make stuff anymore. We want to be a service economy. All of that has come back and it's backfired. The other reason that we wanted to move things over to China was that if China becomes a capitalistic economy and they start consuming, they build a middle class, maybe they're going to not be communists anymore. Well, that backfired also. Okay, so the CPA, what we're doing is we're trying to get rid of all these tax loopholes. We're trying to get rid of, we're trying to make sure it's fair trade. If it's fair trade, if different countries are, polluting or doing things with slave labor, we want to shine the light on that. And then we want to help companies in the United States that want to make things in the United States get to the point where we can help them to get into business or bring business back. We call it reshoring. We met a group, a gentleman that manufactures bicycles in South Carolina. He still does a lot of importing from China, but he's trying to get all of his production moved back here. We met some pharmaceutical companies. This is sort of a statement that boggles many people's minds, and I didn't know this until a couple of years ago. 90% of the active ingredients in every drug that we take in the United States come from China. We don't do any FDA inspections of those pharmaceutical plants. We can't do it anymore. Now what they're recommending is Zoom inspections. Are you kidding me? So we're trying to bring pharmaceutical, because these are things that's important to your health.
Right.
These are things we're trying to bring back. So there's a couple of pharmaceutical companies that are pioneering bringing back pharmaceuticals back to the States. We're involved in the steel industry, which is another strategic part of business. So the CPA, or Coalition for a Prosperous America, is working to reinvigorate and do it right and bring manufacturing jobs back to the United States. And that's what we're all about. Okay? We're not doing this to make Matt and Greg rich or anything. We're doing it for our children and our grandchildren. So that legacy that we leave to them, it's something that they can grab onto and run with.
Right. And it really is a pro-America message. This should not be a partisan issue. I was looking through the guest list you mentioned, being at the conference in D.C. earlier this week. There were Democrats and Republicans there, right? I mean, this is an issue of American jobs. It's an issue of American national security, right? And when you talk about pharmaceuticals, having that ability to get Americans medicines they need, should not be a partisan issue. So love to see that group, and excited to get involved with that on our end as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
So you mentioned after the bankruptcy, your ability to pay back most of your lenders and still on some payment plans there. I was raised with the school of thought that your name is only as good as your word. I heard a rumor that the Oneida folks called you and Greg the Boy Scouts. Can you talk a little bit about what business ethics means to you and any advice you have out there for other entrepreneurs?
Certainly. You need to play the long game when it comes to relationships. I've done business with a lot of people that were me, and it was all about them and money. I was asked by one of the gentlemen that was sort of like that, and anytime you did business with them, it had to be this huge contract written up by lawyers because you were going to cheat and steal and all that. And he asked me, he said, "Well, what kind of relationship do you have with Cutco? Cutco's a family-run business in Olean." I said, "Everything that we do with the guys at Cutco and the gals over there is with a handshake. Mm-hmm. And my handshake, and I'm looking you in the eye, that's my word. Mm-hmm. And we will not, we will not cheat people. We will not try to, do anything that's unethical." And what happens when that happens, when times are tough, then you find that the people that you treated with respect, you treated as equals, they come back and they help you. We had so many friends that helped us through our bankruptcy and got us to where we are today. And like you said, we have a 100% payback plan. We're still all of the secured creditors got paid back, and the unsecureds got a very large portion of their that was due to them paid back, and we're paying back every year. As we're successful, we're going to share with them until they're paid off. Right,
and that's not a legal obligation. It's the right thing to do.
No. There's no legal obligation to that. Right. Most of the time, when someone
unsecured,
when somebody's an unsecured creditor, you might get zero. You might get, if you're lucky, you get 20 cents on the dollar. Mm-hmm. So and Greg and I, and we're community minded.
Right.
The people that work in our factory, all of the team here, we live in the same community. I see them at the store. I ask them how their kids are doing, and they know how my kids are doing. And all my kids worked in the factory, and Greg's kids worked in the factory. And it actually gives you a warm, fuzzy feeling when you go home at night that you're part of something that is way bigger than you. And that you got 70, 80 people or a whole community rooting for you all the time. It definitely helps.
That's right. All right. Well, the famous final segment. One of these days, I'm going to get a true crystal ball I can rub here. But I love to hear right from the visionaries, from the leaders of such an organization. What does the future look like? What is the next stage of growth? Where do you see Liberty Tabletop and Sherrill Manufacturing in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, Greg and I are both 58. We know that we're not going to be doing this forever. So what we're doing now, from an operational standpoint, we're training the next generation of silversmiths. So we're backfilling the bench, so to speak, in the operations side, the sales and marketing side, with young local talent that cares about jobs, that has the same. We're giving them the same fire in their belly that we have, so that we can hand off the keys in a nice little bow package to the next generation. And I was talking to Greg the other day. We want this place to be manufacturing silverware 100 years from now. Okay, this is not a thing where there's way more to it than money. are way more to it than being on podcasts and writing books and doing all of this kind of stuff. It's about the people, it's about the community, it's about the pride in doing something that nobody thought we could do.
Right.
Okay. People laughed at us when we bought this factory, not in our faces, but we could, in hindsight, you could tell that they're basically, okay, these guys just, two schmucks, 40-something-year-old guys that were mid-level managers, are gonna do what Oneida Limited couldn't do. They're crazy. So that gives you the sense of pride. Nobody thought we could do it. So the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to continue to grow. We want to grow organically. We want to grow profitably. We're not going to try to be everything to everyone. Mm-hmm. I sort of say, that it's sort of the Ben and Jerry's of flatware. We're a little bit different, okay? And we like to do things different. But, if you come visit our factory 10 years from now, you might see us wandering in once in a while to say hi, but you're going to see different faces, but the same vim and vinegar is going to be running through the veins of those people.
Right. Well, I don't want to wait 10 years to visit the factory. I hope to get out there myself soon. And I just want to say, Matt, thank you. On behalf of all the Align community. For everyone listening, watching online, visit libertytabletop.com. Join the Coalition for a Prosperous America. Anything else our team and our community can do to help you, Matt?
Well, I want to thank you guys for inviting me to be on so that people could hear our story. And I think what you guys are doing is invaluable. And there are so many people companies that have stories like ours. You're going to have a very long list of people to talk to that have maybe not the same story but similar stories. And we all want to work together to keep the American dream alive. So I thank you so much for reaching out to us. Really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Matt. Keep up the great work. Please tell Greg and the entire team at Sherrill Manufacturing. We say thanks, and we'll talk soon, and God bless.
God bless you too, Bart, and the door is always open.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us on Align. As Americans, we want to buy from companies that make our country stronger. Subscribe to this podcast and share so we can grow our network of businesses and consumers who share patriotic values.